Thank you. Started.
Thank you. Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you very much for attending this meeting today. I'd like to welcome you to our Wednesday, the 10th of November Cabinet meeting here at Newport City Council. We move to today's agenda then, and apologies for absence. We don't have any apologies, but I know the Chief Executive and some other senior officers will need to leave the meeting early today in order to attend another urgent meeting that's coming up. So if we can just note that for the records, Anne, please.
Yes, Leader.
Thank you. Item number 2, declarations of interest. I don't think, has anybody got any declarations on this?
Thanks, Leader.
Okay, then item number 3 are our minutes from our October Cabinet, and these can be found on pages 3 to 16 of the packs that we have. Are colleagues content to agree that these are a true record of our meeting?
Yes, so moved.
I can do.
Everyone content with that? Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for that. We'll move then to item number 4 on our agenda today, and this is the September Revenue Budget Monitor Report. This can be found on pages 17 to 42 of the packs that we have. And the purpose of the report is to highlight the current forecast position on the Council's revenue budget and the financial risks and opportunities that present themselves within the September position. Now, hopefully, colleagues, you've had an opportunity to read through this report, and as you'll see, there's quite a lot of detailed information in this report. So the September 2021 revenue forecast position forecasts an underspend of 7 million. Or just over 7 million, and this forecast is inclusive of the continued financial impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. What I would point out to you, colleagues, and I think is really important to highlight this, is that the financial position does assume reimbursement from Welsh Government in terms of the hardship fund funding, and if there are any changes in this as we move forward, then what will actually happen is there will be adjustments as we go through. And I think it's really important to highlight that, because what that is it actually reflects the very fluid situation that we find ourselves in at the moment in relation to this. So I think it is important that we highlight that at this stage. So, as I said, it highlights the forecast position, and as the underspend is almost 1 million, and this is a 2.5% variance against our budget. And I think we must be aware that whilst Welsh Government have confirmed the availability of that hardship fund, it is subject to revision, so it's important to be mindful of that. Now, as we show in the report and the appendices to the report detail, although service areas are reporting an underspend against budget resulting from difficulties or delays in recruitment and COVID-related activities being reimbursed by the hardship fund, much of the underspend actually originates from non-service budgets. The non-service underspend comes from savings against the capital financing budget, the council tax reduction scheme and council tax collection, the revenue contingency budget, which is currently not needed, and some other non-service budgets which are not committed currently. These together produce the £6 million underspend. But as I've emphasised already, colleagues, there's a lot of movement around this at the moment, so it's important to bear that in mind as we consider these reports. Now, despite service areas reporting an overall underspend, there are some individual areas which continue to overspend against specific activities, and we understand which service areas these are because these are the demand-led services. So in previous years, these overspends related to activity areas such as social services. However, the last couple of years have not really been a true representation of the challenges faced in these areas because of the pandemic and the reimbursement of any additional costs incurred from the hardship fund. Now, given the volatility and uncertainty in these areas, and everyone is aware of the challenges that we face in these service areas at the moment, there is an inherent risk that in-year demands may change from the current forecast. So this is important to note, colleagues, that whilst this is the position that we find ourselves in at this time, as we move forward, it is subject to change, and we know that at this particular point in time, there's incredible pressure on our social service provision. That cannot be emphasised strongly enough. Now, the key areas that contribute to the 8 million forecast position include, in addition to the continued social care risks, there are issues that have emerged during the year and will continue to be closely monitored, but include things such as dealing with ash dieback, remedial works required across the commercial and industrial estate, and the anticipated overspend in areas of emerging risk is expected to be more than 600,000 by the end of the financial year. And I wanted to really pause there and just provide some a degree of explanation, I suppose, in relation to this, to perhaps try and illustrate the uncertainty here. We know that most unfortunately, we're blighted with the problem of ash dieback here in Newport, and it is absolutely necessary that where this occurs, these trees are removed in terms of the risk that they present to the health and safety of our residents. It's not something that we relish because, and we have got a programme of replanting, so we replant 2 trees for every one that we remove. However, it should be noted, and I think this is something that's really important when we talk about increased demand on expenditure, that we need specialist provision to remove it, and there is a cost incurred with that. So whilst our officers are incredibly prudent in their activities and manage their budgets really, you know, in a really prudent manner, there are some uncertainties that that they just can't predict, and these are some of these issues that we're experiencing now. So it's really important to note that. We've also got, and this is again, this is something that we'll all be familiar with, some of this underspend is related to the shortfalls against deliveries of savings targets. So in some areas we haven't been able to progress some of our savings targets that we've already agreed, and this is largely related to the pandemic and the pandemic response. Again, it's really important to understand that in relation to actually reading this report. When it comes to the underspending against the non-service budgets, we have to look at this in the context of some of our other expenditure as well. So firstly, there's a forecast underspend of around 2.7 million in relation to our capital finance budget. And I know we come on to our capital report later in this meeting. But as part of our budget setting, we were prudent enough to fund our capital expenditure financing upfront. What this actually means is resulted in a saving because the budget is not yet required. So we understand why that's there, and we know there will be a call on that budget as we move forwards, but at this stage in the process is showing an underspend. At this stage in the cycle, It's also important to note that some savings that may be demonstrated against our council tax reduction scheme, whilst they may demonstrate as savings at the moment against our forecast expenditure, we would anticipate those increasing, especially as furlough has ended and we see more and more of our residents experience difficult financial positions. Then we would expect to see that council tax reduction scheme fully subscribed as we move towards the end of the year, because it is there to support our residents with any financial difficulties they may have. At the moment, we don't need to draw on the general revenue budget contingency, but which also increases the non-service underspend, but that does not mean that we won't need to draw on it going forward throughout this year. And it's really important again to emphasise this, that the report that we're looking at this time is a snapshot of a moment in time, and that's why we have to continue to monitor this very carefully as we go forward. If I move now to schools, the report highlights that overall schools are anticipating a net overspend of 2.2 million after allowing for reimbursement of eligible expenditure and lost income from the hardship fund. Now, although schools are expecting to overspend against budget, it should be noted that schools carried forward significantly higher balances at the end of the 2020-21 financial year compared with previous years. The higher level of balance is primarily the product of Welsh Government grants issued towards the end of the last financial year, which offset spend that schools had already budgeted for. And as a result of that, most schools have carried forward higher than anticipated balances. And in most of those individual cases, that will be more than sufficient in offsetting the overspends being reported. Now, I'd really like to highlight for you the really good work that's been done around this, and I'm sure the Cabinet member will want to come in on this later, because in comparison to previous years, only 3 schools are projecting to hold deficit balances totalling £879,000, with 2 of those expecting to be smaller than the previous year. So I think that is a really strong evidence of the good progress that's been made in terms of financial management within our schools. And of course, a part of that is a reflection of the level of investment that we've made in our schools, not just in terms of financial resources, but also in terms of the team that we've put in place with knowledge and expertise to support the schools in managing their positions. So I think that is quite important to note there. Clearly, this is something that we need to continue to monitor as we move forward, and it will be important for us to do so. But I'm just going to pause at this point in the presentation of that report and open it up to any comments from Cabinet colleagues. Councillor Davis, would you like to come in there?
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to reiterate your comments in relation to school budgets. I would say that we take, as local authority, a completely supportive approach to our schools in this very, very difficult time, and that applies to budget management as well. And we really have set in place a supportive framework. Schools are responsible for setting their own budgets, but we've worked closely and we put additional funding into schools to support them with setting that budget framework and ensuring that head teachers and business managers and teams have a better understanding of their budgets, and to ensure that there are no difficulties in coming years, so that they understand where that deficit might be or those risks might be. And that we have seen that success in the previous year, taking that approach, in that we have now only got 2 schools left in deficit, and we're confident that will improve as we move forward. It's a really, really good place that schools are in now, and I think it is very much down to our officers with the Newport City Council providing that additionality of support to schools. So it's really good to see that we're reaping the benefits of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Davis. Councillor Cochrane, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I think you've mentioned quite a few things. I think we've got to be careful here when everybody talks about underspends and how much money we've got, because really it's a bit of a false dawn in some respects, because we've had a lot of money given to us to sort of really, I suppose, just accept that you know, that we is paying for some of our core services. Let's be clear about that. And where some of them would have been sort of in an overspend, you know, we're in underspend for that. And I think you mentioned about the vacancies. You know, we've carrying the vacancies. We've had grants, and we've also certainly not progressed some of our packages of care, because we couldn't go into some of these places, and we've relied on families and that to do that. But there's a breaking point for families really to be covering all these packages. So we know what's coming around the corner, so we've got to be mindful of that. I've looked after children. It's shown a decrease, which is wonderful, but I think what's on the horizon as well is the mental health now with children, and we're doing a lot of work now, and we don't know how many of these children and families will be coming into the mental health services, because it is a real worry. So I just don't want people to think just because we've got underspends that we're out of the woods, so to speak, because, you know, it ain't going to be like this all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cochrane, and absolutely, I mean, you put it very, very clearly there. There are emerging pressures on service deliveries that we would have previously not anticipated, and they are a direct result of the impact of the pandemic, and we need to be mindful of it. And I think there's a very strong message to anybody who's viewing this meeting to be aware that this financial position moves constantly. It's not static, it does move constantly, and that's why we have to keep monitoring it, and certainly keep a very close watch on what's actually happening. Would anybody else like to comment on the revenue report? Yeah. Okay, so as I said, colleagues, the purpose of the report was to highlight the current financial position that we find ourselves in. And the report contains a number of recommendations that we're asked to consider. So we're asked to note the overall budget forecast position and the potential for an underspend position to exist at the end of the financial year. Note the continued financial challenges being experienced by certain demand-led services and the need for robust financial management in these areas, as well as the level of currently unachieved budget savings. To note the risks identified throughout the report, particularly in relation to future years and the lasting impacts of the pandemic, as you've highlighted, Councillor Cochrane. To note the forecast movements in reserves and note the improved overall position in relation to schools when compared to previous years, but also note the remaining deficit positions for some schools and the risk of past issues re-emerging if good financial planning and management is not undertaken. So colleagues, they're the recommendations. That's the proposal. These are the recommendations. We've been asked to approve the report. Are members content to move this?
Yes,
Yes, Leader.
Okay, thank you very much for that, colleagues. We'll move on then to the next item on our agenda today. This is item number 5, and this is the Capital Programme Monitoring and Additions September 2021 report, and this is in pages 43 to 62 of the packs that we have before us. The purpose of this report is to submit to Cabinet for approval requests for capital projects to be added to the Council's capital programme, to update us as a Cabinet on the current available capital resources, or as we would describe it in discussion with each other, the capital headroom that we have available to us, and to update Cabinet on current spending against the capital programme schemes, highlighting the forecast outturn position for the programmes as at September 2021. So there is a little bit of a lag with this, which of course you're all aware of. So the report provides the capital monitoring position as at September 2021. And colleagues, as you know, we've set out an extensive capital programme that reflects 7 years of commitment Table 1 of the report shows how that's changed over the financial year and shows the council's capital commitments and spend in the city now totals 285 million over the life of the programme across all service areas. So that is a huge level of capital investment across the city. We're also being asked to approve, as usual, new or extended capital projects to be added to the overall programme. Table 2 within the report details these new capital projects, which total 1.93 million, and how each of these projects are also funded. Table 3 provides the forecast position shown at September 21, which is the focus of our discussion and our report here today. The current position shows a small expected underspend of 216,000, and Appendix C shows the details of this. The table also highlights that there's been some reprofiling undertaken since the last report, totaling just over £6.5 million. Details of where this profiling has occurred is also contained within the report. However, when combining this and new additions and amendments to the programme, this still leaves us with a capital programme of 65.9 million for 2021-22, which is extremely high when compared with previous years. Further work on forecasting and reprofiling will continue throughout the remainder of the year in order to ensure that the capital programme reflects a more realistic timescale for the projects to be delivered. And officers are asked to continuously review projects and update the project profile as schemes progress. I'm sure you've all had an opportunity to read through the detail, but something I'd like to highlight here, colleagues, that in terms of monitoring spend, the report confirms low spending of around 16.5 million against a budget of 65.9 million, so around 25% to date. Now, this pattern isn't uncommon, as we'll be aware, as usually a lot of the cost is profiled for the last half of the year. But what we do need to be mindful of as we're monitoring this, and I'm sure this is something that you've all taken into account when you've been going through these reports, is that this will bring with it the risk of slippage, and that's why there's a need for robust monitoring throughout the rest of the year. However, in saying this, progress is being made on a number of projects, and details of these are noted in the report, and I'm sure that Cabinet colleagues may wish to highlight some of that as we discuss this particular report. Now, the report references a piece of work requested in relation to the financial and delivery risks arising from the impact of COVID-19 and Brexit. And although work with this in this regard continues, it is apparent that there is uncertainty within the construction industry at this time, with particular challenges being experienced in relation to the price of materials such as steel and wood, which are currently in high demand and short supply. Project and budget managers have been requested to closely monitor the ongoing impact of this and manage their schemes robustly. Now, at this point, colleagues, I'd just like to pause and invite you to make any comments that you'd like to make on this report. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Leader. I agree with you with everything you said, given that some of our most important services, such as Flying Start, violence against women, all come under this budget monitor, and it's something that we can't shy away from. There's an awful lot going on. Transporter Bridge, the new leisure centre, the nature walks, that it goes on and on and on. People don't really realise how many services the council provide right across the board. DFG grants, it's everywhere. So I'm really pleased with this report, and I'm really pleased the fact that we're still going on, we're still doing what we do, and we're still supplying and providing services to the over 140,000 residents of Newport City. Thanks, Leader.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Harvey. And you're absolutely right. The range of the work that we do as a local authority really is quite extensive, and people are very often unaware of the full extent of that. Would anybody else like to comment on the capital programme? Councillor Cochrane.
Yeah, just following on what Councillor Harvey was saying, and I think you mentioned it before about the issue of materials and trades and things like that. I was reading a report the other day that there's nearly a 20% increase in raw materials at the moment in some areas with steel and wood. Now that's having an effect really of putting some of our projects that we're already started slipping back, and it's not our fault, let's be clear about that. It's about you can mention the big B word, Brexit and things like that, it hasn't helped. And really when you think about it, we've got the ideas, we got the investments, we're ready to go, there's no question about that. But sometimes things about our control are not helping us, to be perfectly honest, and there's not a lot we can do, but we're banging the door and we're getting as many of these sort of materials in place. And I know that because some of the refurbishment work we're doing in social services. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for helping us to better understand that with the illustrations that you've given there, Councillor Cochrane. I think that's really helpful for the public as well, so they can understand how that does impact. Deputy Leader, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Page 47, just very quickly, just to highlight 2 points really. The city services grants and how budget managers will have to work robustly to get those in place by the end of the year, and the reverse slippage against the new orders of vehicles. It's just the times that we have to wait for these vehicles, some of them being specialist, but it's just order times, that's all, Leader. Thank you very much.
Thank you for highlighting that for us, Deputy Leader. Would anybody else like to come in there and comment on the capital report? Councillor Hughes.
Sorry, Leader, thank you. It's just to sort of, again, when you're looking at the sheer scale of the things that the council supports, I think it's just worth noting, certainly from my portfolio as well, how many of those things that we're supporting the community are increasingly pushing towards the green side of the work that we do as well in relation to the environment. And I think, if you look through the whole list, really, it's everything. It's difficult for people to comprehend sometimes that we deal with everything from sort of the floods, the management of our parks, the amount of money that we spent on changing our LED lights, all the sort of the reuse and the repair stuff that we're doing, the green recovery stuff that we're doing. There's so much actually going on in the city, and I think, I'm sure you might mention it later on, but that's reflective sometimes of the fact that we've been picked up on with the organisational awards this week in the environmental sort of awards. So I think it's just, it's a chance for me to maybe drop that one in there, but an important thing for our council really, that the work that we are actually doing and the investments that we are doing are being recognised nationally as well.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hughes, and I think that's really important, and actually that's an opportune moment really to pause and reflect on the excellent work that is going on. So when we talk about capital investment, actually that's reflected in a lot of the work that has been done, and as you say, absolutely delighted that the organisation received the best organisation award last week at the National Environmental Awards. Really proud of the work that's been going on. I think that reflects the work that's going on across all of our service areas as well. That is not limited to one particular service area. And I think, and neither actually is it restricted to one cabinet portfolio either. So we've seen a great deal of collaboration across the whole of the cabinet on this, led by yourself and also previously by Councillor Davis. But we see the firm support and contribution that that most other cabinet areas, portfolio areas, have made to this as well. And I think that's a really strong illustration of how going forward, working collaboratively, working together, we can achieve so much for Newport and get that external recognition for it. And it would be totally remiss of me not to thank all of the officers who were involved in that for their outstanding efforts and contribution to that. But that really is a good example of how capital investment can actually help us reach our goals in the longer term, but will also deliver benefits for our residents. So thank you very much for that. Are there any further comments, colleagues? No? Okay, then is somebody content to move the report?
Yes, so moved. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Now, the next item on our agenda today is our annual report into compliments, comments and complaints management for 2021, and colleagues, you can find this on pages 63 to 78 of your packs. And I know, Councillor Cochrane, you'll be really interested in this because, as you always remind us, it's actually really important that we record the compliments and the feedback as well. So just to give you an outline, the purpose of the report is to provide Cabinet with an overview of all of our corporate and social services compliments, comments and complaints received during 2020-21. And the report provides us with a summary of complaints received and recommendations for improvement, and also an update of statutory duties conducted in line with Public Services Ombudsman Act 2019. And the report shares the Ombudsman's 2020-21 annual letter to Newport City Council as well. And I'm sure that you've all had quite an opportunity to go through that and consider this. So since the last annual report, Cabinet approved the amended compliments, comments and complaints policy, which was aligned to the guidance issued by the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales. The Ombudsman now have new powers under the Act, which include accepting complaints verbally, not just in writing, the ability to undertake own initiative investigations when the Ombudsman considers them to be in the public interest, and gathering complaints data from public services in Wales on a quarterly basis. But that, however, I should point out that that's for complaints only. So during 2020-21, a total of 162 compliments were recorded for corporate complaints and 12 for social services. A total of 3,104 comments were received for corporate services and 7 for social services. I think it's really important to just pause there and reflect on what we actually mean by comments. And comments are where there's an expression of dissatisfaction on a decision made, or people perceive that the council may have implemented the policy incorrectly. The report that we're looking at actually is a retrospective look, and so therefore we have to take into account the context within which many of the comments that we would have received were made, and that's within the context, of course, of the pandemic and our response to the pandemic. And we know that during that period we did have a high level of engagement with the public on across a whole range of issues, so it is important that we highlight that. Now, during this period, the council also received a total of 202 complaints, 14 of which went to the Ombudsman, and there was Ombudsman intervention with 5 cases. Our complaints team analysed all the comments and complaints to identify any trends, but also any opportunities for further improvement, and they liaised with the relevant service areas. The team continued to develop the service provided to meet legislation and expectations of residents, and the team will continue in the following 12 months to focus on continuing to raise the profile of and understanding of the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales throughout Newport City Council, but also with our partners as well. So everybody should be aware of the role that the Ombudsman plays. And also we can all use that awareness to underpin our commitment to continuous improvement. So at this point in time, colleagues, I'll just pause and invite comments. Councillor Cochrane.
Yeah, I think you mentioned about obviously the compliments, and I think at long last, I think we're getting to the point where people are taking notice. A little bit disappointed that Children's Services didn't have any compliments, to be perfectly honest, because I know when I talk to different people, they're quite complimentary, and I just don't think we're very good at recording it. And I just hope that the new 3 strategic directors can drive down and make sure all their service managers and even people right at the bottom end of the authority start recording compliments. It's interesting. I was at the meeting, obviously, with Councillor Mayers, because I'm involved through the social services. But I think when you look what the Ombudsman was saying, one complainant withdrew the complaint, two were duplicate complaints as well. So when you start looking at it, you start driving some of these down, and it's a real good report, to be perfectly honest. And take my hat off to city services. You know, you look at all those compliments they have, and all credit to you. And I'm sure you'll be mentioning that to Roger, to all the service heads as well, because obviously it's great because they are the face-to-face out there in the city, aren't they? So at long last, I think we're getting to the compliments, but I wouldn't worry about complaints either, because I think the Ombudsman have said in the report it's not to be looked as a negative with a complaint, because sometimes we need to be aware if we're doing something wrong anyway. So I just think it's a good report.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Cochrane. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Leader. I'm just really glad that you mentioned the actual context of the period that this has been in, because I think one of the things for me as well is that often, you know, when services are particularly challenged and services are really under pressure, the staff left often, you know, get under pressure themselves or receive complaints when they're actually working under pressures that some people just wouldn't believe sometimes, you know, that they're and I think it's just an acknowledgement really, and a thanks, I guess, from all of us for the staff that have persevered and stayed with it and actually worked for the council in certainly what I've seen is the most challenging period I've ever seen in my line of work as well. So I just, you know, think that I'm really glad that you mentioned the context that those staff are working and the pressures as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hughes, and thank you for making important points there. Deputy Leader.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I just wanted to come back on what Paul was saying. It is a really acknowledgement to see that we're getting compliments, you know, as well as the complaints. These guys who are out there on the front line, who have worked through the pandemic, you know, who have really put themselves at risk, have spent more time in work than what they have home with their families to provide the service to the residents of Newport. I take my hat off to them. And yes, you know, we will miss a bin collection. That happens. A street light will go out, and it's maybe not fixed, or we've got something wrong. We know we're human beings. But a real big thank you to my guys who are out there doing that day in, day out. And it's nice to see compliments as well as the complaints that come in. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Deputy Leader. Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Leader. I fully concur with everything that's been said. My feelings are these men and women get up every day, they go to work, they do their job. They're human. Errors are made. None of us are infallible. We can all make a mistake. The difference is our guys will hold their hands up and say, I got that bit wrong. I am sorry. And then they go on to rectify it. When people are moaning about the grass wasn't cut or the waste recycling hasn't been picked up, it's not a deliberate thing. They are up against everything. And right throughout this pandemic, we have not had our bin collection stopped. We haven't had rubbish piling up in the street. Our guys have still got up, got dressed, gone out in very, very difficult circumstances, and could possibly have been taking COVID back in to their homes and their children. So I won't buy any complaints, and I know I'm a little bit, but whatever. I won't buy complaints about our refuse, our waste and our street workers, because those guys really have stepped up to the mark. They've done their job and then some, and they're still there, all winds and rain and whatever. I can't fault them. I really can't. Thanks, Leader.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Harvey. Thank you for your comments there.
I think Ray wants to speak.
Ray,
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I thought he didn't love me no more.
No, I got the chat up, so I'm looking at the hands up, but I can't always see then somebody actually physically putting their hands up. Come on in, Ray.
Thank you. Yeah, I concur with all my colleagues, Leader, as you say, in regards to this report. It's very important, and as you say, it's great to see compliments included as well, because I know we can learn from mistakes, but you can also learn from things that's positive. Now, in the past, we'd never heard it, something we were doing very well, and we didn't know really what people were thinking of us on that. So it was always reporting on the complaints, which you should report. Of course you should. I wouldn't doubt that. But I would say this is a raft of other issues that were scrutinised as well. The Audit Commission is obviously the other one, and it's right that we are scrutinised. We're dealing with public money, but I don't think there's many other areas that scrutinise as much as local government, and I mean that as well. I'm not saying we shouldn't be, but
Yeah.
I'd look at central government. I'd look at other areas. Are they scrutinised as local government? Well, I put a question mark at the end of that one, but no, it's a good report. It really is. I welcome it, and hope people do respond in the future on this as well, because that's what it's for. We're there spending public money, so we need to know what we're doing. Yeah, we also obviously we're doing something wrong, we need to know, but if we're doing something right, we need to know that as well. So great, support this, and it's excellent. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Truman. Any further comments? Right, and I'm looking at pictures and the list now, so I can't. No, okay. Well, I think what's really important about this report, colleagues, is that actually what it does is demonstrates our ability to look at what people say to us and actually strive to continuously improve. And actually the feedback elements in terms of comments is really important, isn't it? Because if we actually listen to what people are saying, you know, there's a lot in there for us to reflect on in terms of how our services are delivered. But again, huge thank you actually to every member of the public who takes the time to contact us, whether it's to give us the feedback, whether it is whether they find that they feel that they need to make a complaint, or indeed to make those all important compliments to officers and to service areas. I'd just like to say a huge thank you to the public for taking the time to do that. So having had an opportunity to discuss this report, colleagues content to accept the recommendations?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Leader.
Yes, yeah.
That's great. Thank you all very much for your contributions there. Item number 7 then on our agenda today is a standing item that we receive on a monthly basis, and this is our COVID-19 response and recovery update. And you see the detail around this in pages 79 to 96 of our packs. Now, as you know, colleagues, we receive a regular report, an update on our progress being made towards recovery. But what's also important in relation to this, and it's important to, for people to understand, that whilst it's we're talking about recovery and recovery actions, we're actually also talking about our response as well, because the pandemic, as we're only too well aware, continues onwards. The UK and Wales is now into its 20th month since February 2020 of the COVID pandemic, and during this time the crisis has impacted all communities, businesses and services delivered by the council and our partners across Newport. Newport as a city has had to adapt and respond as necessary to the restrictions to minimise the spread of the virus. For us as a council, our priority has been to ensure the continuity of services with our strategic partners, supporting our most vulnerable residents supporting businesses and ensuring the safety of both staff and customers. And the report provides an overview of what action the Council has taken to date and the progress against our strategic recovery aims and wellbeing objectives. Now, since our last report, as we're all very well aware, Wales and the region has continued to see positive COVID cases increase quite significantly during this time. I'm really pleased to say that they appear to be stabilising at the moment, but this has been quite a challenging period. And of course, this puts pressure on other service providers, particularly the emergency services and the NHS. As we go into the autumn and winter period, there are likely to be increases as we go along, and that will of course impact on hospital admissions. Now, the focus over the autumn will be to get the over 50s vulnerable and health and social care workers boosters, alongside implementing the vaccination programme for 12 to 15-year-olds across secondary school settings. And I did note, and I think this is a positive for us all, that the NHS have just highlighted that they've given out their millionth dose of the vaccine. So really that is tremendous in terms of the work that's been done here in Wales. So when we're considering this, I think it's really important that we consider the position of Welsh Government in this and what Welsh Government is trying to do in order to ensure that we limit, wherever possible, the spread of the virus. So it's really important then for us to reiterate that all-important Welsh Government message, which is about people wearing face coverings, maintaining social distancing wherever possible, and being aware of people, whether they're friends or family, that are still vulnerable people who are susceptible to the virus. It's really important that we follow the advice and guidance the Welsh Government are giving us, providing us with. It's also important, I think, for residents to take up the offers of the vaccination programme. And also, I think it's important to highlight the importance of our residents taking up the flu vaccination programme as well. The focus on health and wellbeing could not be stronger, and we really have to place a great deal of emphasis and effort on prevention at this time. Now, in terms of the Newport City Council and our update and the work that we do, well, we can still continue to deliver services. And as many colleagues have highlighted here today, these services are coming under increasing pressure, and that increase in pressure actually stems from people's own personal experiences of this. We've seen cases go up, and you know, workforces across the country are impacted by this as well. But we still continue to deliver our frontline services, and we also, as a local authority, continue to follow the Welsh Government's advice for staff where they can to work from home. Now, this equally applies to members, and access to the Civic Centre and democratic functions will continue to be undertaken virtually during this period. It's really important for elected members as role models to actually demonstrate their adherence to the Welsh Government guidance on this as well. Now, we, as a council, we've been finalising the technology requirements and the necessary protocols for hybrid meetings in order for these to take place, and as we go forward, we'll be able to implement them. We also, and I know that Councillor Davis will wish to comment on this, we also continue to experience variations in attendance rates across the school settings because of COVID outbreaks, and we've seen only this week where we're starting to experience year groups having to have blended learning implemented again because of this. Catering services are also starting to report issues with supply chains in relation to certain food products, and we're starting to say, I think this is a dual impact. It's not just the pandemic, but it's also the impact of Brexit as well, and it's that terrible combination of factors that are starting to impact on services now. So what are we doing? Well, we're actually actively supporting job recruitment initiatives to support hospitality and HGV sectors, and we're supporting job fairs as well. It's really important that we work with partners to do everything that we can to address some of these shortages in the labour market. On issues around the labour market and staff shortages, as I said, you know, these are starting to impact on our services. And again, we are experiencing some absence where people are actually contracting the virus and can't come into work. However, within this, work does continue, and we continue to support businesses in their recovery, and the housing development programmes continue to be delivered. On that point, colleagues, I think I'll pause and invite any comments. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to very much talk about education, and specifically in relation to, as you quite rightly pointed out, the impact of numbers of children and also staff that we've seen within schools since the beginning of October, really, where numbers have been rising. Been a slight pause, but again this week we've had to close a year group in Llanwern. I very much welcome the provision of the Chromebooks from EdTech, the EdTech grant, which enables us to provide and have that provision of blended learning. But what I want to do is give credit to our teachers and our head teachers, the phenomenal work that they've done in recent weeks to ensure that learning goes on, despite constantly having to move around staff within different environments, constantly trying to keep children within those bubbles, yet ensuring they're educated, yet they are supported, yet they're having staff potentially going off sick, they're not able to get supply staff. There are so many pressures, yet they're still ensuring that children's well-being and learning in school is still ongoing. I visited a number of schools recently, and what I can say is behaviour within every school I visited has been excellent. It's been a calm atmosphere, and what I've genuinely seen is learning ongoing. And what the important point of all that is that children are actually within the school environment, so that they are meeting with their own peers, they're learning to play, they've got that safety, confident factor of a routine, and they are in there with teachers where they should be. And I think absolute credit should be given to our hardworking teachers and support staff and ancillary staff and head teachers, because it would genuinely not happen without them. You really do see how much care and passion there is for teaching within our city, and it really is fantastic to see it. It really is credit worthy and has to be noted. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Davis, and you're absolutely right. It's a reflection of the commitment of the staff across all of our education portfolio. Would anybody else like to comment on the COVID report? Councillor Truman.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Concur with everything on this report, but I got to point out that since the last report, as you pointed out also, restrictions have changed. It reduced to level 0, which we know, and it's got to be managed, and it is being managed. But just like to comment, which is in the report, whereas the contact tracing people were doing what that constantly on clusters, the environmental officers and the like, because of the restrictions being restricted now, they're concentrating on the closed care settings, schools as well, because that's giving them more time to do that. And the enforcement officers, again, because of the relaxing in restrictions, they're giving advice now and assistance to nightclubs and other hospitality settings. So they're still doing their jobs, and it's also giving them extra time now to concentrate on the work, their Monday to Friday job, you know, food inspections and things like that. So they're out and about, they're still working and doing a great job. Just a quick comment on, you mentioned about the vaccinations and the increase in, which is fantastic. My wife Helen and myself, we had our booster injections a fortnight ago, and it was absolutely superb in the Newport Centre, and the way it was set out and organised and arranged was first class. And that's not me saying that on my own, because I've been round a bit, as you all know, and I know a lot of people. and sometimes it's a bit of a oh no. And we were sat there, and the compliments we were receiving as and NHS Wales and Public Health Wales, Nine and Bevan Health Board, it really showed to us the NHS at its best. And that's what it showed to us. It was the NHS at its best, delivering on the front line, doing the work that they get paid for, and they don't get paid enough. And we'd all agree with that, I think. But they're doing their job, outstanding people, outstanding. And as I say, we got a lot to be thankful for in Wales, that's for sure. But the way the vaccination programme has gone out, it's a credit to all of us. And big thanks to all the staff, staff who work for Newport. They were all out in there all the day doing their bits and pieces. So thanks to all of them, and they're doing a fantastic job. Thank you, Leader.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Truman. I think it's important, isn't it, to highlight in that the work of our partners, Newport Live, who facilitated all of this. So excellent. Thank you. Any other comments from Cabinet colleagues? Okay, so colleagues content to agree the report? Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much for that. Well, item 8 on our agenda today then is the post-Brexit update report, and this is on pages 97 to 102 of our packs. And colleagues, you know, yet again, here's another regular report, report that we receive updates on this this situation, and I think it's important to emphasise within this the emerging impacts that we're starting to see that Brexit is starting to have. So we're nearly almost a year into this now, and we're starting to see the impacts across all areas of service provision. So since our previous report in October, Wales and the wider UK economy has encountered several disruptions, which has impacted on households and businesses across Newport. And we've alluded to some of these in our discussions already today. So we can see that the labour market is having quite an impact across different sectors, such as logistics, disrupting food and fuel supply, social care, construction, farming, hospitality. This is starting to increase the pressure, isn't it? And there's an impact here from this also on service delivery, because as we've previously mentioned, the disruptions to city services and social care have actually started to impact on us. And whilst we work really hard and colleagues put a tremendous effort in to try and ameliorate the impact of this, this really is beyond our control, and we just have to try and do the best that we can within this. What we're also starting to see, which is a cause of great concern, is the cost of energy, both electric and gas and fuel, has now increased, and this will see households on standard and prepayment tariffs see an increase in their energy costs. Now, for low-income households in Newport, this is going to have a significant impact and will put further pressure on those vulnerable households. But of course, the decision by UK government to withdraw the £20 uplift in universal credit will also compound the impact of this on our most on low income and our most vulnerable households. So this really is, moving forward, a very difficult and challenging situation where households will be placed in the most difficult of positions, and there is no doubt at all that this winter households will have to make very difficult decisions, including the decision of whether to heat or to eat. And that in the 21st century is, when it could have been avoided, is an absolute travesty. I would add to that, and to those difficult decisions that we see our families facing across Newport, the food prices have been increasing as well. So in addition to the disruptions in supply resulting in certain foods not reaching supermarkets, this is also cutting right into those organisations that do their absolute best to support our families in greatest need. And by that, colleagues, I can't stress this any more strongly. It's not just about the impact it has on households, it's the impact that it's starting to have on food banks. And yet again, we may pause to reflect what we're doing in the 21st century in the developed world when we find ourselves, many families, having to regularly rely on food banks. We may wish to reflect on that. So within this, it is starting to become clearer that the issues being experienced are a combination of Brexit, COVID and wider global economic factors. And these global and national factors are now impacting our residents and our businesses here in Newport. Now, in response to this, our council services have been monitoring the financial and non-financial issues and escalating any immediate areas of concern to the council's gold team. And I think it's really important to emphasise this, that officers are monitoring this and trying to address these impacts. And we are working collaboratively with other public sector bodies as part of the Local Resilience Forum, and this has been effective in terms of managing and responding to the emerging issues. I think what's most regrettable, as I previously mentioned, is that some of this could have been avoided. So there is a possibility that this winter could be tough for some of our most vulnerable residents, our businesses and services delivered by the council and our partners. And what I'd really like to say during this meeting, colleagues, this public meeting, that it is important for residents and businesses to contact the council or our partners if they're concerned or they require assistance. Now, whether this is responding to any severe weather incidents or for debt advice or housing advice, business support, or other matters that we could assist with or just signpost to the correct service. This is my plea to our residents across Newport. Please get in touch. We are here to support you. We provide public services to help and support you. That is what we're here for. So please contact us. Do not suffer in silence. Please contact us because we can help. Now, a few weeks ago, the Chancellor of the Exchequer announced the outcome of the Levelling Up Fund that was aimed at levelling up communities across the UK. So you will see from that announcement that there's a very uneven and imbalanced distribution of funding across the UK, which doesn't really reflect what it says on the tin, so to speak. So there's nothing level going on there. But we did learn that Newport was unsuccessful and that the council will be reviewing, as a council, we'll be reviewing our proposals to see if alternative funding can be sourced. And we will be liaising with the UK government in order to take on board the feedback from our application, because I'm very keen to hear the feedback from UK government on our application. Last week, however, we did receive confirmation that 7 of the 8 projects that we'd submitted into the Community Renewal Fund were successful. So whilst we may not have benefited this time around from the Levelling Up Fund, projects across Newport will benefit from over 2.8 million from the Community Renewal Fund. Another point that I'd like to make, and is something that we review regularly, is the position in terms of our EU and EAA citizens, because it's now been over 4 months since the deadline passed. For a significant proportion of residents in the city, they will have received either full settled status or pre-settled status, and that is over. We are aware that that's over 10,000 applications. What we are aware of, however, is that there is still over 1,000 residents still awaiting a decision. So 4 months on, there's still 1,000 people with this hanging over their head. I cannot stress strongly enough, and I know that I've said this at many points, but I would really like to reiterate this today, that this Cabinet is strongly supportive of our EU and EAA citizens living and working in Newport. We really value them, And we recognise they've all got a part to play in making Newport a great city to live and work in. You bring life and vibrancy to our city, and we welcome you. We want you to be here and contribute to the full life of our city. And so therefore, I'd encourage anyone who's still awaiting a decision or having difficulties in concluding their application to please contact us. Again, we can help, or contact some of our partner organisations such as the Citizens Advice Bureau. So as a council, we continue to work with community groups and third sector organisations in order to ensure EU citizens have access to the services and the support that they need. We're also working closely with Gavo to make arrangements to support further food poverty work. Our community cohesion officers are now focusing on post-Brexit rights and making sure that EU citizens, businesses and services understand their obligations to access services. So I will pause there, although I could probably go on for quite some time in relation to this particular item, and I'll invite comments from colleagues. So Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Leader. I fully support what you've said. And given that certain MPs are incredibly proud that they're opening a food bank in their area, incredibly proud. Are you kidding me? You have working families accessing a food bank because their wages don't cover the bills, their energy consumption or anything else. Do they not realise how some families feel totally humiliated because they have to use a food bank? They see it as something that's shameful. What is shameful is the MPs sat in central government having £500 given to them for their food allowance every month on a 5-day a week. They get £500 to cover the cost of their meals. Well, how about every single MP gives that £500 to a food bank to enable them to take care of the residents who are working all the hours they can to try and keep this city moving? It's an absolute disgrace. I cannot tell you how angry it makes me when a man has to come home after working 60 hours and then go and queue in a food bank because he can't feed his kids. It's a disgrace, a national shame. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey, and I'm sure we share the sentiment there. Councillor Cochrane.
Yeah, following on from that, that's £125 a week. That's more than someone gets unemployment benefit, and that's just on their food when you think about it. The point I just want to make is on the vacancies. There's there's 1 million vacancies across the UK according to the report, and my concern is obviously when they put the wall up to stop people coming into the country unless you earn over 30,000. Well, people in care homes don't earn that. Domiciliary care workers don't that. I don't think social workers assistants earn that. So there's going to be a shortage coming through for some of these areas. And I can only talk about social services. You talk about the farming. You talk about HGV drivers, hospitality. You know. There's gonna be a real issue really of a shortage of people filling these vacancies, and I think that's something that, you know, we're going to wait and see what comes out of that, and I think it's a worrying trend.
Absolutely, Councillor Cochrane. I'm sure again we all agree with the comments you've made there. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Leader. I'm going to crib something said by Councillor Paul Cochrane in one of the previous meetings, really, because as a trustee of a local food bank, the words that he said really resonated me with the last meeting. I've used them quite a few in quotes this last couple of weeks, but you know, how on earth did we get from a position, he said, where we went from 2 or 3 years ago, quite rightly giving food in supermarkets to support impoverished animals, to actually giving food in the supermarkets now to support impoverished people. And I just think, you know, how on earth did that happen? And I think, you know, it's worth reminding people it didn't happen as a result of war or crisis or famine. It happened as a result of government policy. And, you know, we're in this horrifying position really where increasingly in our communities, we're not just seeing people on the poverty sort of line falling into needing support from food banks. We're actually seeing people across the board now sort of getting into some quite serious problems, you know, and I think this is an issue I think that's going to just get worse and worse, I think, without some major changes to the way that we value society. And I think, you know, I am proud of being part of a cabinet and being part of a council that actually does support food banks and does, even though we don't want to, and I know we all would rather see them all go and go forever, but you know, I thank everybody who does support food banks. And you know, as we're coming closer to Christmas now, I hope people really don't forget, you know, the volunteers and the people that are working behind, and also when they do get a chance, when you know, to just keep giving those donations because they really do go to where they're needed. Thank you, Leader. And thank you, Paul, for the comments that you did make.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hughes. Deputy Leader.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm just picking up on one of the issues there around HGV drivers, and obviously from a past experience of mine. But I'd just like to thank our HGV drivers and our drivers, and I've thanked all our staff many times. But and there has been cases out there of people being or trying to be poached, you know, from one company to another one, and being offered X amount of pounds to move from this establishment to that one. But just many thanks to our drivers that have stuck with it. They are not the best of driving jobs in the world, we all know that, but just many thanks to those that have stuck with it and continued to provide our services from Newport City Council. Thank you.
Absolutely, Deputy Leader, absolutely. Any further comments? Yeah. Okay, so colleagues content then with that report. Yeah, everyone happy with that?
Thank you, Leader. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. The final item then on our agenda today is the Cabinet Work Programme. It's on pages 103 to 110 of your packs. Colleagues content to move acceptance of the updated work programme?
Yes.
Happy to move, Leader.
Let me do that.
Okay, I'd just like to thank you all then for your contributions today and your continued leadership within your portfolio areas. It does really make a big difference, and you know, we're really demonstrating what a collaborative approach can actually deliver for the people of Newport. So I thank you all for your continued contribution to that. And on that note, I'd like to close the meeting. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Leader.
Thank you, Leader. Thanks, everybody.